Hi, this is Joe coming to you from my house. Today we're going to learn a little bit about safety. I'm going to go ahead and let my partner start.
All right. Well, I'm Jeremiah. I'm coming to you from my house. That is further away from Joe than anyone else, probably. Um, so, starting off, we are going over silica and what silica is. Silica is also known as silica dioxide. So that's one silica atom per two oxygen atoms. Basic chemistry. It's the most abundant element in the Earth's. It's a combination of the most abundant elements. It's typically found in rocks, soil, sand, quartz. It's very common. Pretty much anything you pick up, you're going to find it. Um, from that, second. From that, we get stuff like asphalt. Asphalt silica is a fairly common. It's used in a binder. I think it usually has sand in it as well. Um, we also have brick and block. Again, any sort of cement mixture, it usually runs with sand. It also has some sort of quartz in it. Usually, this will have silica in it as well. Especially concrete. Concrete is mostly silica. Um, that's most of its binding agent. You also get drywall. Drywall, any sort of like gypsum will typically have a silica in it, or any sort of other types of drywall. Tile, again, very common. It's earth and clay, and usually some sort of straw binder, but that also will have traces of silica in it. Any sort of earthwork, again, most abundant resource that we have, it's going to be there. Demolition, obviously, you've got all your other construction materials. It's already in place, so it's bound to happen during demolition. Any sort of jackhammer chipping, this will also just distribute a lot of silica. Sawing, cutting, again, it's part of the demolition. It's very easy. You're usually dealing with block cement. Many of you have probably done it. Sweeping, cleaning up, kicks up a bunch of dust in the air, especially if you've been cutting or chipping, grinding, what have you. So some of the facts. Um, so silica dust is probably the most dangerous one because of the particle size. There are variations of it in zero point zero 0.01 to 100 micrometers, which the average uh, human hair is 100 micrometers. Anything less than 50 micrometers is invisible to the naked eye. A lot of this is just like if it gets kicked into the air, you may see the dust of it, but you seeing the actual little particles of it is going to be very difficult. And then what happens when you breathe that in? Well, some of the big things is that if you have most of the large particles, which is going to be towards the upper 50s to 100 micrometers, that is going to be what's going to be trapped in your nose hair or any of the upper mucous membranes. So if you're blowing gray crap out of your nose, that's probably that's probably those size. The smaller particles, which are less than 10 micrometers, they can actually just absorb right in through your skin. And this could cause some potential very hazardous health issues. Um, so some of them is like silicosis, which is where it gets into your lungs and it actually creates a very difficult, uh, just makes it very difficult to breathe, and it's almost impossible to get it out. There is no current cure for silicosis. Then you have lung cancer. It's a cancer-causing agent. Then you have tuberculosis. This is very common with silicosis. And then you have COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. They all kind of run into the same thing. Other known risks are kidney disease because kidneys try to filter out toxins. body views the silica as a toxin, tries to get rid of it, gets clogged, and then it can't do anything with it. So silica is recognized as a carcinogen. The World Health Organization, we've talked about it a lot recently. It is a known human carcinogen. This means it's a cancer-causing agent. Then the American Thoracic Society and the American College of Occupation and Environmental Medicine, they've also recognized that it has adverse health effects, just being exposed to it. Now we have a video for you.
So before we start this video, I just kind of want to go into detail a little bit. This video is more or less just kind of overall on how to look at silica, especially on a job site. Me personally, I'm a visual learner. Listening to someone talk is one thing, but I'd rather see pictures along with it. So that's basically going over what we have already kind of talked about in a little more detail and just kind of describing more of the scientific part of things. So if you would, can you go ahead and start the video?
Here you go. If it will load. Here it is.
Crystalline silica is one of Earth's most common minerals. It is found in stone, brick, rock, concrete, block, mortar, asphalt, and sand. Using power tools on these materials for tasks such as cutting or grinding can release tiny particles of silica into the air. These tiny particles are known as respirable crystalline silica. Workers who breathe in respirable crystalline silica can develop diseases that can be life-altering or deadly.
Traditionally, on construction sites, silica with grinding and cutting produces a lot of dust. It gets into the workers' lungs.
Exposure to respirable crystalline silica can cause silicosis, a disease that permanently scars the lungs. It can also cause lung cancer, kidney disease, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, also known as COPD. The chances of developing these diseases increase with higher and longer durations of exposure.
What we're looking at on the left is a normal lung. You can see that the lung tissue on either side of the heart is dark and black, and that means it's full of air. And the X-ray on the right, you can see those white scars throughout the lungs on both sides. That's all scar tissue. Is from a patient with advanced silicosis.
Without protection, workers who are exposed to very high levels of respirable crystalline silica during activities such as abrasive blasting with sand can develop silicosis within a period of months to a few years. Workers usually do not develop signs of silicosis until after they have been exposed for 10 years or more. Once silicosis symptoms, such as shortness of breath, appear, the symptoms can get worse over time, even after the worker stops working with silica.
Usually people who develop silicosis have been very healthy, vigorous people, and they find after years of the disease that they're short of breath, that they can't go very far, they can't walk very far, they can't climb the stairs. They may even be short of breath just sitting still. I continue to see new cases of silicosis, and yet there is still no treatment. So I would like to see prevention of silicosis so that this disease is eliminated from our hospitals and our health clinics.
Silica disease can be prevented by controlling exposure to silica dust. Water can be used to wet the dust and prevent it from getting into the air. Vacuums can be used to remove the dust at the point where it is made.
We stir up a lot of dust, so we try to prevent as much of it getting in the air as possible. So we use these vacuums. But while we're working on cutting the joints out, we create a lot of dust, which we collect in the vacuums inside these bags. Much rather have it in this bag than I would inside my lungs.
Once I tried the new things, it worked well, because at the end of the day, I went home without silica dust in my lungs. I went home clean at the end of the day, and I got used to it.
Gary Sasse's family business is stone carving. His father and his grandfather both died of silicosis.
I believe that our industry here has worked hard to bring in new technology that does help with the silicose problem. I also believe that there's also room for more education for the workers themselves to understand the critical reasons why they have to be very careful in this industry.
In today's climate, we stress to our customers safety, financial stability, company stability. We remind our men we want them to go home same shape or better shape than when they showed up at work that morning.
OSHA's rule for respirable crystalline silica requires employers to protect workers from silica dust to prevent them from developing disease. Silica-related diseases can be prevented if proper controls are used to reduce workers' exposure to dust. More information on OSHA's requirements to protect workers exposed to respirable crystalline silica can be found at www.osha.gov/silica. For information about other OSHA health and safety standards, go to www.osha.gov or call 1-800-321-OSHA.
Okay, so moving on, silica exposure in the United States. So approximately over 2 million workers are exposed on an everyday basis to silica in general, whether it be high levels of silica or low. Of course, your most at-risk workers, obvious is us, the construction workers, which people that fall underneath that, heavy equipment operators, because they're moving a lot of dirt, sand, which is a makeup of silica, drywallers, plasters, concrete guys. We're all getting exposed to silica on a regular, everyday basis. I imagine that 2.3 million workers is much higher today, just because the workforce is growing and growing. Regulations. So as you can see, this specific OSHA code was kind of put in place pretty recently, just a little less than 3 years ago. So basically what this rule did, so the limit of exposure to silica was 250 micrograms per cubic meter of silica particles in the air. So they moved that down to 50. So they basically chopped that down to a fifth of what it was. Your action level, which is your normal breathable level, is 25. So once again, OSHA is becoming more and more strict on silica exposure, just because the hazards and the research that is being done on it. Next thing is just kind of more details about regulations. So how OSHA breaks it down, there's basically 3 ways that they can kind of control or help control silica levels within a job site. What we're going to look at is a table. So basically what this table is, it's describing what you need to do and how to do it to control silica. So in this first one, it's talking about walk behind saws. So pretty much what you can do with a walk behind saw is in the second column. So what can you do to help reduce the amount of silica or dust that it's throwing? And then the far 2 columns on the right side is basically what you should limit yourself to behind working with that saw. So if you're more than 4 hours or less than 4 hours, it's going to tell you what you need to do, whether it be certain types of masks you need to wear, certain type of uniforms that you need to wear, And it's just also telling you when to change shifts as well. So you don't need to be running that walk behind saw for 8 hours or 10 hours a day, just yourself. So basically all that's saying is you need to learn how to rotate crews. Moving on to option 2. This is more or less just going more in detail on about the OSHA regulation that was put in place. You guys can read it. It's basically what I was just talking about earlier. Option 3. So this is all on you as a person. So this is pretty much saying you need to know your limits, as well as the administration needs to help you know those limits. So what the administration is going to do, they basically need to know, they're going to take personal samples of the air. So they're going to collect air samples probably all throughout the job site. And they're going to have those tested and figure out how much silica is in the air at that point in time. This will help them be able to control how many people can be in that area, how long those guys need to be in that area for. Once again, safety is number one. You also need to monitor yourself as well as others, just kind of looking after your teammate while you're on a job. You know, if they're coughing and hacking, they definitely need to get out of there. Needs to be said with that. So additional OSHA requirements. On a job site, these are kind of some things that you definitely need to see. You need to have some type of written action plan on how to control silica, what measures need to be done to do so, what you can and can't do. Another one, you need to have a person that's kind of overseeing it, whether it be a true safety guy that you have at a company, or just you designate a person for the day saying, hey, you need to kind of look after the dust and make sure we're following rules. And then as a company, you always need to provide training to all your workers, especially about silica. You know, sites, it has to be clean. So you got to have good housekeeping practices. That's another thing that's going to be talked about in worker training, as well as designating competent person to do so. To offer medical exams to respirator users, especially if they're working with a respirator over 30 days a year. That obviously entails that they're working with high amounts of silica and or dust. So they're going to be at higher risk, and you kind of need to look after the guys that are a higher risk. And always keep records. I mean, that'll always save you in the long run. So moving on, personal protective equipment. This is kind of the big one. You need to know what you need to have with you at all times. So you won't, one, get fined by OSHA, and two, you know, protect yourself. You know, a lot of stuff with silica is masks. And to have a good seal on a mask, you need to be clean shaven. You know, the big things nowadays is beards. You know, I got scruff myself, so technically that should be trimmed up. And always make sure you're maintaining your equipment as you should be per user directions. Those are always key to follow. So more with the personal protective equipment, here's just kind of a picture of the different masks that need to be, you know, looked at, or that OSHA looks at as suitable for certain jobs. So as you can kind of see, each mask has a different rating and or what they should be used with. As you can see down at the bottom, it has each variation of the silica level of exposure and what mask needs to be worn with each type. So controlling silica exposures, we've been talking about it the whole time. You know, it's a hierarchy, as you can guys see in the picture. So the first one we're going to talk about is elimination. Hands down, elimination is the hardest one to be able to do. You know, you can never truly eliminate silica on a job site. And if you were to do so, maybe the job site, maybe you shouldn't do the job site in general. When we're talking about substitution, so say we need to do a substitution for sandblasting. Okay, well, instead of using actual sand, maybe we can use walnut shells or dry ice. So it's just kind of one of those things to help reduce that silica level of exposure. The next one, engineering controls. So basically, how can you make your tools fit OSHA compliance as well as protect yourself? So you think about that walk behind saw from earlier. What are some things that we could do to make that comply with silica rules? Maybe we can hook up a vacuum system to it, or we can spray water on it to just try to help settle that dust. You know, and that's pretty much all it's talking about. Administrative controls kind of falls between management and as well as everybody, is being able to look out for your teammate, as well as being able to rotate crews in and out in the high silica areas, just to kind of try to protect everybody and keep everybody at a low risk. PPE, it's the last on the list, mainly because it's the least desirable option. And I only say this because personal protective equipment is the last stand against silica, as well as just protecting yourself. Elimination would be the greatest, but when we can't eliminate it, personal protective equipment is basically where we're going to need to be at. So we're moving on to another video. In this video, it really portrays a good idea that safety is timeless.
In the 1930s, hundreds of men were hired to dig the Gauley Bridge Tunnel in West Virginia. They, too, were ignorant of the risks they ran. Desperate for jobs during the Depression, they worked with virtually no protection in a tunnel thick with silica dust. 476 men died here from silicosis.
My name is Walter Kincaid. I worked in the tunnel 4 or 5 weeks. Every day I hear of someone dying with silicosis. I worked until I got sick, and the doctor told me that it was silicosis. And he also told me that anyone that worked as much as 24 hours would not be living 15 years. I think something should be done for our wives and family after we are gone.
Once again, after the deaths, there was a public outcry.
I personally believe that 2,000 men are doomed to die as a result of ruthless destruction of life by American industry.
The next year, 1936, the Walsh-Healy Act was passed. Although it only applied to contractors doing business with federal agencies, it was the first time the government directly imposed health and safety standards.
Okay, so now we are going to move into our last little bit, administrative controls. So basically, what are you going to do on the job site that's going to show where the silica's at? First thing that you're going to do, you can always mark it with a nice little sign in the correct places, as you can kind of see in the slide here. That will work. is kind of rope off areas or tie off areas, just kind of showing roughly where heavy silica exposure is going to be. As I talked about earlier in the upside down triangle hierarchy, you need to keep rotating your employees. So you're going to take a higher silica level employee and you're going to replace them with a lower silica level employee and vice versa. And you're just going to keep doing that, as well as just kind of limit the shift times that each person is allowed in that said area. Pretty much finishing up silica. As you guys can see, this is our kind of our resource page. That's pretty much all I have. Jeremiah, do you have anything else?
Just mainly just want to state that me being in the construction industry, I do a lot of concrete work. That's what my company is mostly known for. I've done plenty of sawing, chipping, grinding, what have you on concrete. Most of the time, we use a lot of water control. It's about the easiest thing to use, just because at the very basic, if you have a bunch of sawing and cutting that you have to do, you can run to whatever store you need to run to and grab a garden sprayer, just like a gallon pump one, and you spray the blade as it's cutting, and you just keep spraying it until you run out, and then you stop cutting, refill, and repeat until the end. That seems to be the most common industry practice that I'm aware of at the time. Other places that you might see some silica, at least ones that I've kind of been around, are if you're ever working like in a glass factory, that's going to have a high silica exposure rate to it. Most of them actually require respirators and just other safety gear as you go in, and that's something that we've had to deal with as well. I think that's all I have. Joe, do you have anything else you want to say?
Actually, yeah. Me being in the drywall industry, I'm constantly sanding, cutting, gypsum. I'm constantly throwing dust around. It's pretty much my favorite thing to do, it seems like. So I'm always wearing a respirator when I'm on a job. And when you, especially with respirators, you got to know how to change the filters. And that's pretty much all I have. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email us.
Thank you, guys. See you later.